Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight.
Stand for humanity, stand for Palestine, stand for George Galloway.
Far-left activists in the civil service get exposed. Plus, a football legend kicks off on Humza Yousaf's hate crime fiasco that could turn the Old Firm derby into a farce. And
I think the events of the last few days have been a great cause for concern.
how on earth has the sex scandal honey trap MP who threw his country under the bus still got a job? And
an extreme level of hostility shared between these crowds, of course.
There were Hitler fanatics at a pro-Palestine march. Plus, I reveal the new debanking scandal, funding withdrawn for the elderly because of their political views, and exclusive polling shows the public wants the government to reveal the truth about asylum seeker sex attackers. On my panel tonight, it's ex-BBC and ITV political chief John Sargent, commentator Alex Armstrong and Apprentice finalist Joanna Jarju. Oh, and what's wrong with this? Get ready, Britain, here we go. Our country is under attack from the inside. Next.
Patrick, thank you, and good evening. The top stories. A Conservative MP has said he was the victim of cyber flashing and was the member who first alerted police to the parliamentary honey trap sexting scandal. Bosworth MP Dr Luke Evans said he'd received unsolicited explicit images and messages over WhatsApp. Yesterday, Tory MP William Bragg told The Times he sent intimate pictures of himself to someone on a gay dating app and was then manipulated into providing phone numbers. So far, around a dozen MPs, staff and journalists are known to have been targeted. This evening, the Metropolitan Police have confirmed they're now also investigating. Police are searching for other body parts after the discovery of a torso at a Salford Nature Reserve. Greater Manchester Police says the human remains were found wrapped in plastic by a member of the public at Kersaldale. The gender and age of the person are currently unknown, but police believe it was an adult. A murder investigation is now underway and a search is taking place in the local area. Multiple arrests have been made after thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters marched through central London for the annual Al-Quds Day demonstration. Protesters marched from the Home Office to Downing Street this afternoon. Pro-Israel counter-protesters were also present, waving flags on Parliament Square and chanting for the release of hostages being held by Hamas. The Met Police says 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of inciting racial hatred after an Israeli flag was burned during those demonstrations. It says new powers to prevent disruptive protests come into force, with offenders facing up to 6 months in prison or an unlimited fine. Meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary is calling for a wholly independent review into the killing of 3 British aid workers in Gaza. John Chapman, James Henderson and James Kirby were among 7 World Central Kitchen workers who were hit by Israeli airstrikes on Monday. Lord Cameron has welcomed the dismissal of 2 IDF officers and says the UK will now carefully review the findings of an initial report on the incident. The Israeli army says the deaths are due to serious operational failures. And millions of people will receive a boost in take-home pay from tomorrow following a cut to employee national insurance. From the start of the new tax year, Class 1 contributions will be reduced from 10 to 8%. Meanwhile, a further 2 million self-employed people will see their Class 4 national insurance reduced from 8 to 6%. The government says around 29 million workers will benefit from the changes. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Patrick.
Good evening. Far-left activists in the civil service need to be sacked. Civil servants at the Department for Business and Trade have asked to stop work immediately unless we halt arms sales to Israel. Is that any surprise, though, when we have civil servants out campaigning for George Galloway?
Stand for humanity, stand for Palestine, stand for George Galloway.
Civil servants who refuse to work on matters of global and national security should be dismissed. They are also threatening to take the government to court if they are told to ignore ECHR rulings and send people to Rwanda. This is a matter of border security. Both leaving the ECHR and having tighter border controls are issues the British public feel very, very strongly about. So, the activist civil service will be ignoring both the will of the government and the will of the people. The same Home Office staff who've been offered trigger support if they read about slavery, as it could remind them of past traumas and give them flashbacks. There is mandatory training on inclusion and belonging and free helplines, which can be called any time of the day or night, 365 days a year. But is that a shock when the permanent secretary to the Home Office, a man called Sir Matthew Rycroft, he is the civil service race champion as well, despite literally not being able to do his actual job?
How many people travelling on small boats that's been refused asylum have been sent to a third country or back to their own country over the past 3 years?
I don't think we have. I think
we'll write to the committee with those numbers, Mr. Anderson.
So we've seen how civil servants will rebel on international trade, on defence and on our borders. But they'll also do it when it comes to terrorism as well. The latest report into the Counter-Terror Prevent programme exposed Islamist terrorism as the overwhelming threat, and that fear of being called Islamophobic was essentially putting us all at risk. Well, a whistleblower then attended a counter-terrorism course for civil servants that rubbished the report, rubbished the author of it, didn't address immigration as an issue when it comes to the terror threat, and disproportionately spoke about right-wing terrorism. Remember Brexit? A civil servant nearly handed Gibraltar back to the Spanish without a single shot being fired. And Dominic Raab, who was a minister at the time, demanded that they were more productive when it came to our Brexit negotiations. He said there were very activist civil servants effectively trying to block reforms they did not like, related to areas including Brexit, prisoner parole and human rights. He was slammed for his conduct, despite never shouting or swearing at civil servants, leading him to ask, if we can't probe, if we can't scrutinise, how do we deliver for the British people? Civil service staff listed their biggest wish for 2024 as being a change of government. They threatened to go on strike unless they're allowed to work from home all week. Staff at the Information Commissioner's Office don't just have to refer to their colleagues by their preferred pronouns. No, they also have to genuinely believe that they are of the opposite gender as well. They also have to believe that men get the menopause. Staff have been given male and female passes so that they can choose what they identify as on any given day. This is all the woke stuff, of course. You're paying for it. You're paying for courses that all mean the same thing, like this: inclusive leadership, leading inclusive teams, managing inclusion. All separate courses, all doing the same thing, all paid for by you. But the most important fact is that we now have civil servants who appear to be blocking government policy. We have more than 500,000 people working in the civil service. We can probably afford to lose quite a lot of them. Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. I am joined by former BBC chief political correspondent. He was a big cheese at ITV as well. It's John Sargent. I have got entrepreneur and social commentator Joanna Jarju and political commentator Alex Armstrong. John, I'll start with you. Are you concerned about an activist streak within the civil service?
Well, yes. I mean, if anyone doing that within the civil service put themselves immediately in danger, they're not allowed to do that. If they feel strongly about an issue, it's perfectly straightforward. They can make, first of all, complaints within the system, and if not, they can resign. So it's not as if these poor dears are trapped in these jobs which they can't get out of. No, they can get out of them. I think they're exaggerating the chances. First of all, the chances of Britain, in fact, cutting off arms supply to Israel. I think that now seems less likely. That's my guess. From what James Cleverly, the Home Secretary, is saying, he thinks that's unlikely, and I think that's unlikely. One reason for that is that, remember, if you're going to have trouble with Rwanda, you may then have to appeal to the idea that this, in fact, we're being stopped because of international law. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh, we must obey the international law with regard to Israel, but we want to ignore it when it comes to the boats. So I think for various reasons, I think this is being exaggerated. You've always got to watch the unions on this, because they love to say, we'll protest about this. And people then think, oh, it's a story. It means the whole of the civil service is in chaos. It isn't at all.
Look, Alex, I know you feel very strongly about this. I mean, the idea that the civil service could be actually having a detrimental impact on government policy. I mean, it's like being undermined from the inside. It's literally like that.
Yeah, I mean, how do you expect to get anything done when the people that are there to do the work absolutely hate the work they've been given? I mean, in my business, they wouldn't last 10 minutes. They'd be sacked if they had this kind of attitude. It seems to me that the politicisation, so I don't get that word right, get that out of my mouth tonight, is just deeply embedded in the civil service. They obviously don't like working for Tories. We've seen that with the takedown of several ministers. But the way that they disrupted Brexit, I mean, you said it perfectly in your opening statement, Patrick. We've also got a problem with unions, because when you go to see these Palestinian marches, the pro-Palestine marches, they've always got union banners. I don't know if you noticed that. There are always union flags being flown. So it worries me that unions infiltrating the civil service are now having a detrimental impact politically.
Joanna, this sets a very, very worrying precedent. Now, whatever people's views on the Israel-Hamas conflict, or whatever their views might be on Rwanda, I would just politely suggest that one day there might be a democratically elected government that you agree with who wants to enforce a policy that you also agree with, and if the civil service were blocking that, then you'd probably have a problem with it.
I guess so. I mean, I feel like the civil service should be impartial, so it's difficult for me to kind of go against them when it comes to things like this. But I do think that there is also a line when it comes to the morality and also what they're required to do legally. So when it comes to things like selling arms to Israel, that goes past whether they like something or not, or whether they support it. It's actually putting them in the hot seat when it comes to what's actually legal and what's not. Because when it comes to actually their defence, if it's found that Israel are breaking international law, then they don't have that defence. So I think that it's completely viable for their trade union on their behalf to write to the government and say, hey, actually, are you getting legal advice behind closed doors that you're not telling us? But then the problem is that the government are then coming back and saying that the legal advice is confidential. These are the people who are in the hot seat.
Yeah, no, I very much... on one point, I feel quite strongly about it. This question of legal advice, people think, oh, why can't they publish it? But in fact, if they do, what would be the effect of that? They don't. It's a long tradition not to reveal what the legal advice is. And that's in order that ministers have more room for manoeuvre, and you don't give more power, even more power to the lawyers. So be careful what you wish for.
Should a civil servant who refuses to enact government policy be sacked?
Absolutely. And if you've got an opinion, stand for Parliament. It's as simple as that. There's an electoral system for a reason. Don't frustrate the current government because you disagree with them.
No, but it depends whether it's something that's moral or not. So if it's something that's just
It's not their place to make moral judgments, Joanna. It's down to the politicians. They're there to do it.
No, but this is what I mean. If it's, for example, if I was a civil servant, you know, I was a Remainer, I don't think that I have any right to get in the way of that. But if I'm also in the Department of Business and Trade and I'm working on arms sales to Israel and there is potential legal implications for that for me as well,
but what about
then they have
stuff
every
that you
right.
don't know about? That arms sale might lead to the death of the bloke who's the leader of Hamas. You don't necessarily know. Well, why would it be your place to do that?
Well, I think that it would be my place to do that because it depends whether Israel is actually breaking international law or not. Obviously, they're going after Hamas. Nobody's, you know, saying that they shouldn't. But also, it depends what the ICJ actually end up ruling.
I think the other point about legal advice, you think, oh, it's quite simple. Ask the lawyers, they'll then come out with a clear view. Chances are they won't. They'll sort of say, well, could be a bit tricky, but then it might be a bit tricky. So you don't get a clear advice. And similarly, in areas like this of arms exports, it's always a bit tricky. It's a sort of, well, how serious is it? How much are we doing this? Case-by-case basis? How many of the weapons being used in Gaza actually were made in Britain? Very few, if any.
Less than 0.1%.
So, you have to weigh these things up. But if someone won't work in these departments, they don't necessarily be sacked from the civil service. Just move them to another
let's
department.
say Donald Trump becomes the President of the United States again. And people in the civil service don't like that. And we want to do a new trade deal with Donald Trump. And people think Orange Man bad, he's evil, he's going to lead to... Do they then revolt over that? It's such a slippery slope with all of this. I mean, you rattle off quite a few examples there. So when it comes to Brexit, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to international trade, when it comes to defence, all of that stuff, when it comes to the terrorism prevent scheme thing. And I just wonder if our civil service has been completely captured by the hard left.
Well, I think it has been. I think there's a lot of civil servants are more left than they are right. Let's be honest. We know that because we know from the policies that are being frustrated are the more right-wing ones. But, I mean, look, it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear to me.
But a lot of these policies are also the shaky policies. So, for example, I'm not saying that they were right to try to get in the way with stuff when it comes to Rwanda, but also that has been a massive legal debate. When it comes to arms to Israel, there are potential legal implications. Everything else, I think they should keep their mouth shut and just do their job. But when it comes to anything that could actually implicate them, they've seen all of the documents. It's their job to sit and scrutinise these things as well.
It's the job of the civil service to warn, to say, look, these are the problems. Were they perhaps, many of them, right when they talked about the problems of Brexit? There were a lot of problems. Were they meant to say, shush, 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 we're not allowed to talk about this? They've got to go through all the objections, all the problems, and present them to the minister, say, yes, you could do that, but if you do...
Fine. But then when so Dominic Raab, the evidence against him was that he didn't shout or swear or anything like that. He didn't bounce anyone's head off a desk or anything like this. It was the case that he, well, from what we can gather, he
was a bully, and that was actually...
I was just about to say...
I think he was necessarily a bully.
He was to his civil servants. I happen to know this is true.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I mean, I just think if someone had nearly handed Gibraltar back to the Spanish, I think I'd be inclined to get a bit angry about that.
Those who can't do
everything he said is wrong.
Those who can't do politics go into the civil service.
I think that'd be a little bit... You've done what with Gibraltar? There you go. But anyway, right, look, coming up, there's a helpline is set up for Scots who get in trouble with Humza Yousaf's new hate crime crusade. Scottish and Chelsea football legend Pat Nevin explains how 48,000 fans could be in breach of this ridiculous new law at the Old Firm derby this weekend. But next, after senior Tory William Ragg admitted to sharing the mobile numbers of colleagues with a man he met on Grindr in a sex scandal that has rocked Westminster, should the disgraced MP resign? I can't believe that the line out of Jeremy Hunt's mouth today is that he's courageous. Courageous? Former Tory Minister Edwina Curry, who knows a thing or two about salacious Westminster scandals, takes on anarchist Lisa Mackenzie. I've got to warn you, these ladies do not get on with each other, all right? So strap yourselves in. Humza Yousaf, are you watching?
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Children's stories like Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland now come with a trigger warning at universities, alerting readers to possible themes of white supremacy.
Yes, these warnings are being applied to colonial narratives, that's the claim, commonly found in adventure stories and famous novels from the Victorian era. Well, joining us now is the actor Charlie Lawson. And Charlie, these warnings have been applied to Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland. What's this university getting at?
Well, look, first of all, this is nothing new. We hadn't heard about it for a while. Universities have been doing this over the last couple of years. I remember having a chat with one of your colleagues. But when Gabriella, the lovely Gabby, phoned me up today, I had to beg her to put me on after 9 o'clock because I found myself getting rather irate about the whole thing. But I will do my best to be very polite.
Yes, keep it clean.
Yes, look, which is quite difficult for me, as you'll appreciate, over this subject. Look, this is universities just jumping on the same trying to be relevant bandwagon. Is it any wonder that we look at the quality of graduates from university, and in my humble opinion, some of them are slightly disappointing. But I did phone a couple of people I knew who had sons and daughters at various leading universities, and they had been speaking this morning, and thank the Lord, they think it's a complete load of bloody nonsense, as I do. Give the C.S. Lewis Centre a ring in East Belfast, because that's where your man came from, and I think you'll find you'll get short shrift, because we're not all about that in East Belfast. We don't censor anything.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Coming up, Scotland and Chelsea football legend Pat Nevin weighs in on Humza Yousaf's new hate crime laws ahead of this weekend's Old Firm derby. But first, should Tory MP William Ragg resign? It's time for our head-to-head. Right, so the senior Tory MP at the centre of the sex scandal, William Ragg, will not have the wit removed amid concern that he's been the victim of blackmail. Indeed, Jeremy Hunt, remarkably, was out defending him this morning.
I think the events of the last few days have been a great cause for concern. The MP involved has given a courageous and fulsome apology.
Courageous? Well, the sex scandal emerged on Wednesday night with a foreign actor like Russia or China initially believed to be behind the incident. And that was important, OK? Which saw MPs send explicit text from a person identifying themselves as either Charlie or Abby. Now, GB News can exclusively reveal that the sender would pretend to have met the target years ago before developing the conversation further. These are some of these messages, OK? 2 of the targeted MPs are believed to have responded with explicit images, as you do. The scandal then developed away from a potential cybersecurity breach by a hostile state when William Ragg broke cover last night, claiming that he'd passed on personal phone numbers to a man he met on Grindr because he was worried about compromising material that the man had on it. So, not a foreign actor then. Well, while he might be crying blackmail now, it wasn't too long ago that Ragg himself was slamming a culture of blackmail at the heart of Boris Johnson's government. Here he is speaking to GB News in March last year.
There was a cultural problem at the time within government that they thought that they could overtly control the voting behaviour of members of Parliament by either directly or implicitly threatening to withdraw projects and funding from their constituencies, which I don't think is acceptable.
So tonight I am asking, should William Ragg be sacked? Let me know your thoughts. Email me gbviews@gbnews.com. Tweet me at GBNews. While you're there, go and vote in our poll. The results to follow shortly. Doing battle on this now is former Tory MP Edwina Currie and anarchist Dr Lisa McKenzie. Edwina, I'll start with you. There's nothing courageous about this. He's thrown this country under the bus because he didn't want naughty pictures of himself to get out there.
Oh, William Ragg is a complete and utter prat. In fact, there are ruder words that I could use. I think he's a complete idiot. absolutely astonishing. I'm the president of the Conservative Association next door to his Hazel Grove constituency. I remember being a little surprised when he was chosen, and he's now retiring. He's actually already said he's leaving Parliament before this all blew up. He's retiring from Parliament, Patrick, at 36 years old, which is the age that I entered Parliament. And perhaps, you know, he was just quite simply too young to be in there. I think they should have chosen his mother, Julie, as the candidate. She's got much more going for her. But I don't think there should be a by-election. We're going to have a general election within months. Right. The choice has already been made of who is to replace him as the Conservative in Hazel Grove. And I think as far as the electorate concerned, the voters are concerned, another by-election would just be an expensive indulgence, and indeed what they would prefer from William, as from all MPs, is they just get on and do their job.
Right, OK, so you think, in a nutshell, he's a prat, but he shouldn't resign, basically. Right. I'll go to you now, then, Dr Lisa McKenzie. I mean, I absolutely cannot get my head around this. This guy appears to have lobbed every single person under the bus, including potentially this nation, and, yeah, here he is, still taking his paycheck.
Yeah, and I can't believe I'm agreeing with you on something, actually, Patrick, but I do agree with you. He should be sacked. It's not about him resigning or having any choice in this. You know, this Conservative government, they're acting like they're in the last days of Rome. You know, I don't know if Rishi Sunak thinks that he's Nero, sort of playing the fiddle while Rome burns, but you know, this is what happens when you're right at the sort of fag end of a political system that's absolutely broken. This guy, he doesn't need to have the sort of manners to resign quietly. He needs to be sacked. Rishi Sunak, it doesn't matter about whether or not there should be a by-election. This really, you know, he's thrown his colleagues under the bus. I mean, that's. You know, I would at least have thought that would be, you know, his colleagues would be calling for him to go.
Yeah, I would have thought so. I mean, Edwina, seriously, why should this guy be given the luxury? I mean, he's potentially exposed some colleagues to, well, he has really, hasn't he, to a blackmail plot. And yet here he is, he carries on, and you see what some MPs go for, and you think, good grief. I mean, Boris had a bit of cake.
This is like a late night comedy sketch, isn't it? We have the fag end at the one end, and we have exposing himself at the other end. Absolutely. I mean, you know, when you're a member of Parliament, when you're in any position in public office, you have to be extremely careful about any intimate or personal relationships of any kind. And certainly the daftest thing that you could possibly do is take a photo of your private parts and send them to anybody. I can't believe that he's such an idiot to do something as stupid as that. And then to think he's being blackmailed. Maybe he was. Maybe that sort of pressure was there. Maybe the Chinese or the North Koreans or whoever are, in fact, the original actors in all this. But you should never put yourself in that position. Never, 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 never. You should have more sense.
When it first broke,
he's howling into his pillow right now and wishing he had never done it.
Well, I'm sure. I imagine it is. When it first broke, though, Lisa, yeah, the line was, right, this looks like, you know, it's Russia, it's China, it's North Korea. I mean, potentially, this is some bloke in his mum's basement who happens to be hanging around Westminster on Grindr, and he's managed to infiltrate the cabinet with sex pics. It's bonkers, isn't it, Lisa?
It is bonkers, and that's why, really, you know, he's got to go. Rishi Sunak has got to show some backbone on something. And if it's just... Look, sort of showing your private parts on Grindr, I believe, is very common. I believe that's the thing that you do on Grindr. But what he should have done is when he realised that this was happening, he should have at least sort of fessed up and said, I think I might have done this and I might be getting this a bit wrong and I might be on my depth. But actually throwing the people you work with under the bus, giving out personal phone numbers, that should be why he should go. Showing your private parts on Grindr is standard.
It's standard.
I wouldn't know about these things at all, Patrick, and I'm sure you don't either. But taking pictures of your private parts and sending them to anybody under any circumstances, even if it's for medical needs, really is a crazy thing to do. You know, all the alarm bells should have rung. Everything about it should have said, as it did for many of the others, I don't think this is right. I don't think this is somebody that I know. I don't think this is somebody I want to know. Anybody who wants to see my private parts had better come and be nice to me first and, actually meet in person, all the rest of it. I'm more concerned about the people of Hazel Grove. The last thing they need is the world's camera people descending on them and asking them their personal views of pictures on Grindr. No. Can we just ensure that he does his job properly from here onwards until such time as the electorate are able to take a view? And I think I agree with Lisa. I think I know what the result will be, unfortunately.
All right, Lisa.
Can you say that 2 other MPs had actually responded by sending pictures of their
Apparently so, yeah.
3 MPs?
What is the world coming to? I mean, how about a few traditional values? How about saying, I'm not going to do anything like this. This is ridiculous. This is clearly a scam. What are we going to ask for next? Money? Whatever.
You've spoken about this publicly before. You had your own relatively salacious scandal, Bessie, didn't you? I mean, is this wildly different to that?
Oh, we didn't talk about it at the time. It was totally consensual. They were real human beings. No, he was a real human being. I won't go any further than that. And it was very enjoyable. Enough said.
Flipping heck, right? Okay, Lisa. So, all right, your view is that obviously this guy should go. I mean, there is another question, really, isn't there? Which is, I mean, I don't normally buy into the old psychology of Westminster stories and all of that stuff, right? Okay, but when I look at something like this, and I think clearly how easy it appears to be to get serving MPs to send you pictures of their various different orifices, and I think, what the heck is... who are these people, Lisa?
Well, I'm just cringing. I'm still cringing now about thinking about, what happens in the Tory party. I mean, this 1923 committee takes on a whole different idea for me now, because it seems now like at the end of every Conservative reign, they all sort of they're in like the last days.
The thing is, though, sorry to interrupt, trying to drag it back to some semblance of sanity and all this is this is what we know about, right? So if we know about this now, just about, I mean, it begs the question, honestly, how many serious high-level politicians have been compromised? If this is just a random bloke on Grindr who's, decided that he wants to see how far he can push this thing, fine. But, what have the Chinese done? What have the Russians done? Who have they got in their back pocket? This, for me, is a genuinely massive concern. And if somebody like William Ragg, is going to go dishing out phone numbers left, right and centre and all of that stuff, then, I think we have a serious problem right at the heart of government, as I'd say, in politics as well. Look, both of you, thank you very much. I have enjoyed it tonight. It's been real. Thank you very much. Right, Gary on X says he's totally compromised and either needs to resign or be sacked. George on X says, I think this just sums up the calibre of our MPs and explains why the country is in such a mess. Sarah says, I wonder why he resigned when he's standing down at the next election. It will only cause a by-election, waste local taxpayers' money. Look, I get what you mean. And I'm not a massive fan of needless by-elections and all of that stuff, but I just think giving out the phone numbers of other MPs and not, it would appear, because of a state actor blackmail plot, but because you didn't want what might have been a drunken mistake to get out. I find that bizarre. But anyway, your verdict is now in. 92% of you think that William Ragg should resign. 8% of you say that he shouldn't. Right, so coming up, I reveal the new debanking scandal. Big story, this is an exclusive for us here as well at GB News. Funding withdrawn from the elderly and vulnerable because of someone's political views. But next, Scotland and Chelsea football legend Pat Nevin, he kicks off on Humza Yousaf's hate crime fiasco. It's just going to come to a head. On Sunday, it's the Old Firm derby, and it's going to be turned into an absolute farce. He reveals all ahead of the huge Rangers versus Celtic title decider this weekend. I'm Patrick Christys tonight. This is GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Storm Kathleen is on the way for this weekend. It will turn unseasonably windy, but it's also going to turn unseasonably warm as well. Here's Storm Kathleen developing to the southwest of the UK. That's approaching through the next few hours to bring some rain to more southwestern areas through the next few hours. That rain will turn quite heavy as it moves into parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Further south, though, as the night progresses, it will turn that much drier, but the winds will really start to pick up through the early hours hours of Saturday, particularly across the southwest here. However, it's a southerly wind. It's dragging up exceptionally mild air, so it's going to be around 12 or 13 degrees to start the day on Saturday for many of us. So it's going to be a very mild day. Across the east as well, it should stay largely dry through much of the day, but you will notice that breeze. But it's in the west where we'll see the strongest winds. There is a wind warning in force for Northern Ireland, many western areas of Scotland, Wales and England. Here there's likely to be some travel disruption. So if you are travelling about, make sure you check before you travel on Saturday. But in the east, where it's a little bit more sheltered and warmer, we could see 22 degrees on Saturday. Now Sunday's going to be another fairly mild day, but there's going to be more in the way of showers for central areas of England, Wales, the southwest as well. These could turn heavy. The winds will also remain very strong across the far north of Scotland on Sunday. Into Monday, northern areas will likely stay fairly unsettled, but it looks like it could turn a little bit drier across the south, with temperatures returning closer to average.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
I don't think you can go and watch a Shakespeare play unless you already know it. It's almost like you have to understand the story and the characters, and perhaps have even done a bit of reading into it. Because if you went completely blind, especially in today's world where we don't speak in that kind of way, it is, I think, probably a bit alienating.
But Dawn is saying it is alienating at the moment because of the lack of representation.
You know, the actual phrasing they use, right, OK, the disproportionate representation propagated white, able-bodied, heterosexual, cisgender male narratives. I'm sure there's people sitting in a room going, what's the most ridiculous thing we can come up with today?
Yes.
But are really, just chuck all these words at it, cisgender, and it's just insane. Of course, Shakespeare was what it was back in the day, and that's why it's mostly blokes and they're mostly white.
And lots of speculation that he was actually gay, isn't there? Because he never really saw Anne Hathaway very often and stayed away a lot of the time. I don't know, maybe he was a big
He might have
gay
been transgender for all I know. I mean, I don't...
Biggins, I'm looking at you.
No, I think you're right. I mean, you know, I think that goes for the profession too. I mean, I do think I mean, I remember seeing Macbeth in London with Judi Dench and Ian McKellen, and it was one of the most exciting evenings ever. And it was a cold night at the Donmar Theatre, outside and inside, and that gave it atmosphere. There are certain things that you go along and see something else, and you think, I'll walk out in the interval.
Yeah. Macbeth is a sexy play, though.
Let's talk about, there's so many. Can I live to be 100?
Oh, this is depressing.
I think it is depressing. I like to stay here now. I don't want to live to 100.
Don't say that.
I'm right behind you.
I don't even want to. My father died at 63. That'll be me gone this year.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Now, the Free Speech Union has launched a helpline for anyone arrested or contacted by Police Scotland after controversial hate crime legislation was rolled out north of the border. And they could be in for a very busy weekend because old firm foes Rangers and Celtic clash at Ibrox in a much-anticipated title decider. While it's no secret that there's no love lost in the stands when Scotland's two most famous clubs come face-to-face, there are concerns that 48,000 passionate fans could fall foul of Humza Yousaf's hate crime crusade. Police Scotland have been forced to pay overtime to deal with the deluge of complaints, and Rangers legend Ali McCoist has led the criticism he's branding the law's unenforceable madness. But the First Minister, who is apparently a lifelong Celtic fan, remains adamant that this is a great idea.
We've got with the Hate Crime Act, with the new offences that created, is a very high criminal threshold. So we have behaviour has to be threatening or abusive and intended to stir up hatred. So I've got every confidence in Police Scotland's ability to police on the back of an Old Firm game, just as they have done for many years previously.
Well, I'm joined now by Scotland and Chelsea football legend turned top pundit. It's Pat Nevin. Pat, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Is this bonkers, do you think?
Well, we're going to find out very, very soon. As you alluded to before, on the first day, there were 3,000 complaints. Now, I'm not saying they were all spurious, but 3,000 complaints on the day that the Hate Crime and Public Order Act was put into force. Now, sadly, it came out on April Fool's Day, which was a bit of a shame, really. So I had all this stuff going on. But then, even worse than that, you've got a Celtic Rangers v Celtic game coming up because it's at Rock Park. And I have a slight suspicion that there might be some reaction to that from both sides. It has to be said, but mostly Rangers fans inside the ground that day, but there'll be Celtic fans watching and indeed listening. So there might be the possibility that that phone line may well go into meltdown after this one, because we know that there are a variety of songs that are sometimes sung. And, you know, we heard also that Hamza Yusuf said that it's a very high bar, a high threshold. But remember, there's another little thing as well, the non-crime hate incident. Now, if it's a non-crime, but you'll still be on file if someone makes a complaint about you from whatever side. So it's a concerning and interesting time, and I'm keen to see what happens at the weekend. And I'll be out there at the game, watching and listening.
Good, well, good. Not stirring up hate, of course. But, I mean, this is the other aspect to it as well. You mentioned the non-crime hate incident, but that idea of, as well, stirring up hate, I think is open to interpretation. Because, you know, if you saw the lyrics of some football songs just written down on paper or read out in a completely sanitised courtroom, as may happen, all of a sudden people go, oh, yeah, that's obviously intended to stir up hate. But when you hear them on the terraces, sung by 40-odd, 50-odd thousand people as part of a song that's sung every week, I mean, that isn't, I wouldn't say that's, you know, stirring up hatred, is it really? It's just part of the game, isn't it?
Well, I'm not sure it's part of the game. Certainly something that Scotland has, and many people in Scotland are embarrassed about. They don't like the sectarianism that goes on. But one person's sectarianism might be someone else's just belief in their own history. Right? So you have an argument there. So then you immediately start to say, right, who makes the judgment call here? Now, it used to be there was a different set of laws towards it. Now the laws have been arguably beefed up. So we're going to have to try and find out who makes that decision, where they're going to go with that decision. Are the police going to get involved? Now, let's be straight about this up front. You're not going to get the police wading in at 40,000 people and try to drag them all away one by one. I don't think the pencils would last long enough when they put it in their wee books, you know. So what is going to happen from that? Well, we don't know yet. But in a slightly serious note for a moment, if you look at other countries and like if there's racist chants, sometimes the games are stopped. Or sometimes there are no crowds let in to the next set of games. Now, I'm not for a moment suggesting that should be what happens. I'm saying that must be a possibility going down the line somewhere. And that is the problem when you bring various legislations in. You always have to watch for a couple of things: the unintended consequences and mission creep. And that's the danger. And I suspect, Patrick, you're on my side with that one, because the fear of mission creep there is the big fear. Now, Scotland originally had another bill a few years back called the Offensive Behaviour at Football and Threatening Behaviour Act. We've repealed it. That's how badly it worked. That's how badly it went wrong. It's been repealed. So, you know, people are looking at this one now and thinking, right, OK, how is it going to be used? Is it going to be used sensibly the way that Hamza Yusuf is suggesting there? And by the way, apparently, and I don't know if this is true, but apparently there were more comments about Hamza Yusuf than there was about J.K. Rowling.
There have been. No, there have been, which is, I mean, hilarious, because the police have also said that they are, which again, I don't know why they said this, but they've said that they are going to investigate every single incident, OK, every single report, which technically means that Hamza Yusuf has around 1,800 outstanding police investigations against him, which obviously no one will find against him. But I mean, it's remarkable, really, when you think about it. That guy's the First Minister, and again, you see that on paper. Am I right in saying that Celtic fans now have been... they're not going to be at this game because of safety and security reasons? Is that right?
It goes longer and deeper than that. Celtic fans and Rangers fans don't go to each other's grounds and haven't done for a long time. Now, there's a variety. If you ask either side, they'll give you a variety of reasons for it. Some people say it was because one set of fans trashed the other's ground and then they were banned from it. Another people, well, a lot of people will suggest that it's actually purely financial. The fans of one club may not want to be moved out of their seats, their season ticket seats, to let their big rivals in. It's a real shame, because from an outsider's point of view, and I see myself as an outsider in this, the one thing that's the big sell in that game is the vitality, is the noise, is the two sets of noises and the atmosphere, which can be very, very toxic at times. That is the one big selling point around the world. And for quite a few years now, and it's not recent, for quite a few years now, that hasn't been the case. However, I would underline that from next season, Celtic and Rangers have come to an agreement that there will be slightly more of the away fans allowed in. So this isn't a recent thing, and it's nothing got to do with what we're talking about just now.
As well as being a top football pundit and indeed a legend, you are also a taxpayer. Well, I hope anyway. And by that, I just wonder whether or not, probably too much, but there we go. Whether or not you think that you're getting value for money as a taxpayer on this. They're having to bring in extra police for overtime to actually man the phone lines and investigate all of these, no doubt quite spurious at times, incidents that have just come in as part of this hate crime bill, etc. I mean, just as a bloke, as an ordinary bloke, take the football out of it. Would you rather maybe that your tax money was being spent elsewhere, do you think?
I think everybody accepts that people in the public sector, be it police, be it doctors, whatever, they are stretched as it is just now because there isn't enough money for a variety of reasons, and everyone will have their own reasons for that from your own political perspective, but there isn't enough to go around. Now, if the money is going to be spent on policemen answering, some of them are spurious calls, not all, but some of them will be spurious calls, when they could be doing real policing, and we all know what that is, yeah, I think the common man in the street and women in the street will say, well, wait a minute, I don't like this to that at all. So, yeah, I don't think there's any great argument about that. But in the base of it, and it's probably worth saying, I think it's well-intentioned. I think the idea, anyone who says, right, do you want to stop hatred? Yeah, that intention's fine. You like that, people who work together and live together in a more friendly way and communicate in a more friendly way. It's that mission creep they will talk about. And also the argument for freedom of speech, which I, probably very much somewhere where we come together, I'm a great champion of. And the ability to allow freedom of speech and freedom of ideals without it becoming threatening is, again, that's a very dodgy and a very grey area. But if it's leading to a possibility of danger for someone, yeah, I think that's where freedom of speech, it probably draws a line with most people. But at this point in time, the big fear and the big worry of this, there's a number, we're talking about religion purely here, but of course it's disability, sexual orientation, identity, intersex, they're all involved in this. So it's a complex piece of legislation, but the complexity hasn't even begun to surface yet, and I think most people know that.
And very, very quickly, as in a matter of seconds, who's going to win?
Oh, the big question. Absolutely no idea.
Oh, he's sitting on the fence. He's sitting on the fence. Good luck, Pat. Look, thank you very, very much. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show. It's tremendous to actually interview you. I listen to you on the radio all the time, so there we go. It was Scotland and Chelsea football legend Pat Nevin. Right, coming up, I'll bring you some exclusive polling data that shows that the public wants the government to reveal the truth, whatever the truth may be, when it comes to crimes committed by people who've just got to this country, and whether or not they want to leave the ECHR. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But next, well, you've heard about the debanking scandal, but this is a massive update to it. Funding is being withdrawn for the elderly because of someone's political views. Chief Operating Officer for the Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth, Lionel Shriver, he reveals everything that's going on, and that's next.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Danny, there's an irony here, isn't there? And that is this. On the one hand, the BBC expect older viewers to cough up more, and yet every opinion poll in the land shows us, Danny, that older people are the least satisfied with the service they get.
Well, the BBC don't give a damn about older people because, as I discovered when I was binned for being 50 and white from the BBC in the Midlands to diversify the lineup, they're after a younger audience because the longevity of the institution, that's the BBC, Martin, relies on the next generation of licence fee payers. And this is quite important, and it's a great point that you've raised. Anybody who's over the age of 50, certainly 60, the BBC doesn't care about you because they're interested in attracting the next generation of licence fee payers. And when those 25-year-olds that they're after at the moment become 40 and 45, they'll stop caring about them too. Otherwise, the BBC just won't exist. It relies on new blood, if you like, when it comes to the licence fee. So that's a great point. They just don't care about middle-aged people.
And yet, they're now floating the idea of older people paying more. How would that work? Would it be means tested?
I know. If ever you wanted to satisfy your curiosity that the BBC had a socialist agenda, it's the fact that they want the proletariat to pay more, sorry, to not pay, and the bourgeoisie to pick up the bill. This is classic Marxism for you. I know we're treating this lightly, Martin, but how would they means test you? Are you going to have to provide evidence of your bank account? And of course, people's financial situation, they change. You know, people's finances are fluid. So one year you may be what they class as wealthy, and then the next year you're not. So it's a situation that I find just impossible. How it's going to work, I just don't know. It's something that I just don't feel happy about.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Coming up, is the government hiding the potentially dangerous impact of illegal immigration? But first, a chilling new scandal has raised fears that the politicisation of our public services could stretch far beyond the debanking scandal. COO of Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth, Lionel Shriver, runs a walking group for the elderly, which received funding from the local council in Windsor and Maidenhead and NHS Frimley. But Sunil was horrified to receive an email just weeks ago informing him that the funding was being cut because of, quote, racist and offensive posts that he liked on X, formerly Twitter. His heinous crime, you may ask? Well, outlining examples of Islamic extremism and simply pointing out that it's not Islamophobic to be worried about Islamic extremism, which, of course, it isn't. But first, of course, I am joined now by Lionel Shriver himself. Sunil, thank you very, very much. Could you just explain a little bit more detail as to exactly what happened here? Because, yeah, they have essentially gone after a group of elderly, vulnerable people because of, well, your views, really, in a way.
Yeah, so, like, in short, I got involved with mental health, mental well-being. In my previous job, I was managing a team, and there's clearly one of members of staff that was suffering from depression. I had no idea how to handle it, so my company really good. They made me a mental health first aider, so during the course, I realised that this is actually a much bigger problem than I ever anticipated. I've never, me personally, had any issues, but I saw this is people more should be talking about it. My dad, who was a local councillor at the time, very involved in the local community. We went around and we could see that there was a lot of people, especially post-COVID, elderly people living by themselves, isolated, vulnerable. So then I came up with an idea of starting a walk and talk group. You walk for 30 minutes and then we just talk about nothing too clinical, just more sort of how we can be more positive. It could just be, some of these people, a lot of times, just a chit-chat, just a way to...
Yeah, it's a nice thing to do for, you know, often a lonely part of society, you know, marginalised group of people, etc. So you were doing that. That was all going rather well. It was a charitable thing to do.
It was going really well. Really enjoyed it. I'd moved into the area recently as well. I've lived in Maidenhead my whole life, specifically Cox Green. Moved there 2 years ago, so it was also a good way for me to meet new people. And I really enjoyed it. And then essentially I put forward a grant, an application for a grant. I saw that Windsor and Maidenhead had this scheme where you could, if you're promoting mental health or physical health, or there's a whole criteria of sustainable helping. I thought, okay, I could apply for this. Prior to that, I was funding it myself. It wasn't, you know, costing a lot, but, you know, renting the venue, refreshments, all that sort of stuff. Then I thought, okay, I can ramp this up. I can get more people to come. I then applied, did a whole business plan, had meetings, got approved fairly swiftly. And then off the back of the approval, I then went to local businesses in Maidenhead and I just said, look, I'm doing this thing. I can fund, I can, you know, pay for you to come. So one of the first things I thought was, from the course, I know people who have financial distress is a massive reason people get depressed. So I contacted various companies. There's small, very small homey mortgages in Maidenhead. I thought I'd contact them. They were like, we can come in, we can help elderly people when it comes to downsizing. We can try and give them ideas in terms of they're going through financial difficulty.
This basically in a roundabout way, well, quite a direct way, actually, I think about it, was really saving and improving lives, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
And so what happened then? You liked a post on X, did you?
No, so what happened is I just going by usual day-to-day, I received an email from RBMW, Royal Borough Windsor of Kings, saying you will not be granted the grant anymore. We're going to cut it on the basis of Islamophobia on what you have liked and what you've posted. So the tweet you showed on the screen just now, that one, and I had liked similar tweets about Islamic extremism, it not being Islamophobic, to talk about Islamic extremism. They specifically pointed out on that tweet it being an example of Islamophobia. I then went back and said, OK, well, I disagree. You know, I work in with Islamic banks. I'm not Islamic, but, like, you know, I go to Saudi Arabia with my job. I have to go there once a quarter. So I'm well versed in that area. I've been to our local mosque in terms of that community, especially with my dad being involved in local politics. So I've never been accused of it. No problems from anyone, anywhere. And so I wrote this all back. They came back to me and said, quite of a, I think you showed it on screen, the response was a very just generic kind of, this is our protocol. And then they said there's no right to appeal. So my big thing was, well, how do I talk about this? Because you're literally saying, I want to appeal, I want to do a hearing, let's, you know, hash this out, let's have a...
So realistically, you essentially called out Islamic extremism, right? So, you know, Islamism, terrorism, etc., and that was deemed to be Islamophobic, and the funding was withdrawn.
Yeah, that's essentially, and where it started, you know, the reality is, I don't want to go down this road, but, you know, had I said the exact same post about, you know, evangelical Christians in America, far right, I don't think my funding would have been cut, and that's the reality. If I said it about maybe Hindus, Jews, or whatever, I don't think.
And is this NHS, this local councils, is this who's behind it? Because I think this is going to be something that a lot of people are actually experiencing but haven't maybe publicised before.
Oh, for sure, and, you know, and what's really worrying about this is the opaqueness. So there's a lack of transparency. When I voiced and said I want to appeal, I wanted to know who do I appeal against, and it was quite clear that it's a combination of NHS, Frimley, and the local council. But they're kind of passing it over.
OK, look, really interesting stuff. I would like people, if this has affected them, to get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com. Thank you very, very much. In a joint statement, NHS Frimley and the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead said, we are committed to ensuring that fair and equitable processes are in place for the distribution of innovation funding and the support of health and well-being of local communities. We recognise Mr Sharma plans to make a formal complaint, and they will provide a response in due course. But next, OK, look, I bring you some exclusive polling from GB News that reveals what the public really think about asylum seeker sex attackers.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Storm Kathleen is on the way for this weekend. It will turn unseasonably windy, but it's also going to turn unseasonably warm as well. Here's Storm Kathleen developing to the southwest of the UK. That's approaching through the next few hours to bring some rain to more southwestern areas through the next few hours. That rain will turn quite heavy as it moves into parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Further south, though, as the night progresses, it will turn that much drier, but the winds will really start to pick up through the early hours of Saturday, particularly across the southwest here. However, it's a southerly wind. It's dragging up exceptionally mild air, so it's going to be around 12 or 13 degrees to start the day on Saturday for many of us. So it's going to be a very mild day. Across the east as well, it should stay largely dry through much of the day, but you will notice that breeze. But it's in the west where we'll see the strongest winds. There is a wind warning in force for Northern Ireland, many western areas of Scotland, Wales and England. Here, there's likely to be some travel disruption. So if you are travelling about, make sure you check before you travel on Saturday. But in the east, where it's a little bit more sheltered and warmer, we could see 22 degrees on Saturday. Now, Sunday's going to be another fairly mild day, but there's going to be more in the way of showers for central areas of England, Wales, the southwest as well. These could turn heavy. The winds will also remain very strong across the far north of Scotland on Sunday. Into Monday, northern areas will likely stay fairly unsettled, but it looks like it could turn a little bit drier across the south, with temperatures returning closer to average.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight, do you want the truth on asylum seeker sex offenders? I reveal exclusive polling. And
my heart says that the way I feel most myself is to go by the name Fred. That's because I'm non-binary.
Teachers are ignoring the rules and continuing to pump gender nonsense into kids. Also, Hitler fanatics at a pro-Palestine march, plus
the Mini, which has decided to make the Palestinian people pay for the grievous crimes it committed by attempting to exterminate the Jewish people.
Come on, have some decency.
Left-wing journalist Owen Jones is in hot water again. I've got all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages with ex-BBC and ITV political chief John Sargent, commentator Alex Armstrong and apprentice finalist and entrepreneur Joanna Jarju. And what is wrong with this? Get ready, Britain, here we go. Tell us how many violent sex criminals we've imported. Next.
Patrick, thank you and good evening. The top stories this evening. A Conservative MP has said he was the victim of cyber flashing and was the member who first alerted police to the parliamentary honey trap sexting scandal. Bosworth MP Dr Luke Evans said he'd received unsolicited explicit images and messages over WhatsApp. Tory MP William Ragg told The Times he'd sent intimate pictures of himself to someone on a gay dating app and was then manipulated into providing phone numbers. So far, around a dozen MPs, staff and journalists are known to have been targeted. This evening, the Met Police have confirmed they're also now investigating. Our other top story today, police are searching for other body parts after the discovery of a torso at a Salford Nature Reserve. Greater Manchester Police says the human remains were found wrapped in plastic by a member of the public at Kersal Dale. The gender and age of the person are currently unknown, but police believe it was an adult. A murder investigation is now underway and a search is taking place in the local area. Multiple arrests have been made after thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters marched through central London today for the annual Al-Quds Day demonstration. Protesters marched from the Home Office to Downing Street this afternoon. Pro-Israel counter-protesters were also present waving flags on Parliament Square and chanting for the release of hostages being held by the Hamas terror group. The Met Police says 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of inciting racial hatred after an Israeli flag was burned during the demonstrations. It says new powers to prevent disruptive protests come into force, with offenders facing up to 6 months in prison or an unlimited fine. The Foreign Secretary is calling for a wholly independent review into the killing of 3 British aid workers in Gaza. John Chapman, James Henderson and James Kirby were among 7 World Central Kitchen workers who were hit by Israeli airstrikes. Lord Cameron has welcomed the dismissal of 2 IDF officers and says the UK will now carefully review the findings of an initial report on the incident. The Israeli army has this evening said the deaths are due to serious operational failures. And a planned strike by over 600 Border Force officers at Heathrow Airport has been suspended. Members of the Public and Commercial Services Union were due to walk out for 4 days from the 11th of April over roster and shift pattern changes that they said would result in job losses. However, the PCS said it was being suspended in an attempt to seek further negotiations with the Home Office. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's over to Patrick.
Welcome along. It's time to reveal exclusive polling that shows you, the public, are fed up of being lied to about the number of crimes committed by asylum seekers and illegal immigrants. We have record levels of legal and illegal immigration. We are set for a record year of channel crossings. We are paying more money than ever for these people. We have a right to know how many crimes they are committing, how much less safe we are, and for that to be a part of the discussion when it comes to border control. So here we go. It's official. Most people think the government should make data on all crimes that are committed by asylum seekers and illegal migrants available to the British public. Overall, 53% of all voters strongly or tend to agree with this statement, while only 18% disagree. Now, among Conservative Party voters, more than 3/4, so 76%, would like to have that data available to the British public so we can all get a better sense of who is committing what crime in modern Britain. This week, Rishi Sunak said that he would leave the European Convention on Human Rights if they blocked Rwanda flights. Well, we can now reveal 36% of voters said they agree with withdrawing from the ECHR, 31% don't want to, and a further 34% said they don't know. So it's up for grabs, isn't it, really? 66% of Tory voters want to leave and just 15% of Labour voters. Now, that is a very, very clear message to the Prime Minister about what his actual voters want, isn't it? But who do you trust to stop the boats? Well, the overwhelming answer is neither. 55% of you don't trust either of the big 2 parties to resolve this issue. Get this, though, just 7% trust the Conservatives and 15% trust Labour. That is absolutely devastating for the Tories. But how bad are things nationally for Rishi Sunak? Well, here is the very latest voting intention results. Are you ready? Labour are on 45%. The Conservatives on 19%, Reform are at 14%, the Lib Dems are on 9%, and the Greens are at 8%. The Conservatives are now not even attracting half of the people who voted for them in 2019. Dare I say it, but telling us the truth about asylum seeker criminals and pulling out of the ECHR might turn the tide. But before I get the thoughts of my panel, I am joined now by the man behind the polling. It is Professor Matthew Goodwin. Matthew, thank you very much. Look, great stuff, this. OK, so first things first, the public want to know about asylum seeker and illegal migrant criminals, don't they?
Well, absolutely, they do, Patrick. And of course, this is part of a bigger debate that we've been seeing playing out in the newspapers. A Conservative MP, Neil O'Brien, wrote a fantastic piece in the Times this week saying, look, in lots of areas in the immigration debate, we simply don't have data. We don't know who's committing crime. We don't know who's contributing to the economy or not. We don't know how different groups are performing in schools. There's lots of data here on the immigration debate, Patrick, that lots of other countries are collecting. and we're not. But what's clear from the polling is when you ask ordinary Brits, look, do you think that the government should be making data on crime and other issues available to them? More than half the country say they agree with that. They think absolutely they should. And this is about trust, Patrick. This is about people, the taxpayers, the British people being able to see clearly what is going on in the country and who is committing crime and how do those levels of crime compare across different groups in British society.
And also a fundamental right to know. And the other thing there, standout thing anyway, I suppose, was to do with the ECHR. Now, quite up for grabs in a sense, but the amount of Conservative voters that would be happy for Rishi Sunak to pull out the ECHR, again, is very telling. A base that, let's remind ourselves, he is losing currently.
Well, absolutely. So remember that the rumours coming out of Westminster this week is that Rishi Sunak's going to go for it. He's going to, pull the trigger on withdrawing from the ECHR if the courts start to block these flights to Rwanda. Now, the crucial thing for him is we've got about 2/3 of Conservatives on side with this notion of leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. You've got a plurality of all voters who are quite up for leaving the European Court. So look, my message to Rishi Sunak would be, you've got to find some way of winning back those 2019 Conservatives. You've got to find some way, Patrick, of suppressing that Reform Party vote in the polls. They're only 5 points behind the Conservatives. I mean, this is getting close, the race between Reform and the Conservatives. And I would be suggesting to Rishi Sunak, look, you're going to have to pull an immigration-themed rabbit out of the hat. You're going to either have to leave the ECHR, you're going to have to take even more radical action on stopping the small boats, you're going to have to outline your plan to get net migration down to sensible levels of 100,000 or 200,000, because to be frank, Patrick, that's the only thing he's got left here. Otherwise it's game over. I wrote this week, lastly, I don't know how low this Conservative Party vote is going to go. I mean, it's 19% in our poll today. I mean, when's it going to stop falling? When's it going to stop collapsing? I don't know. I've never seen the Conservative Party be this weak in the national polls, with the exception of the spring of 2019 when Brexit was really injecting chaos into the system. Now, of course, there's a crucial difference, Patrick. In 2019, you had Boris waiting in the wings with a message, get Brexit done. Well, there's nobody waiting in the wings today, and there's no clear, compelling message to get people back on side. So I think the Tories are in an existential crisis.
Well, look, Matt, thank you. And thank you. There's more to those polls as well that we are going to be talking about a lot over the course of the weekend here on GB News. So make sure you go and check all of that out. That is Matthew Goodwin there. And also make sure you check him out on Substack and all his socials as well. Look, let's get their thoughts on my panel tonight on that exclusive GB News polling data. Former BBC and ITV chief political correspondent is John Sargent. I am also joined by entrepreneur and social commentator Joanna Jarju and political commentator Alex Armstrong. Look, Alex, I'll start with you and then work my way down the line. What do you make of this latest polling data then? I mean, it looks pretty devastating. However, the majority of Brits do want us to know the truth when it comes to crimes committed by asylum seekers and illegal migrants.
Yeah, and that's perfectly acceptable, and I don't think anyone should disagree with that. We should know who's coming to our country and what they're giving back, essentially. If they're going to come here, they should give something back. What really strikes me about what Matthew was just saying there, and I think this is the key point, and I actually disagree. I disagree on a single point. I don't think there's anything Rishi Sunak can do. Leaving the ECHR won't make a difference, because it's too late. It's too late in the election cycle. He has got no results. He's got nothing to show for him being Prime Minister for all this time, until right at the last minute go, oh, by the way, I'm this immigration-hating Prime Minister. No one's going to buy it. So I don't think there's anything he can do.
OK, Joanna, yeah, look, I mean, two revelations there. I mean, the first one being that the public do want us to know about crimes committed by asylum seekers or illegal migrants. I mean, do you think we should?
Yeah, I mean, I accept that. I think that any data that affects the public, whether it's to do with migration or anything else, or whether it's to do with arms sales to Israel and any legal advice that's being given, I think everything should be transparent. But at the same time, it would be interesting to see how the data is actually spread out, in terms of what the actual crime is. Because I think usually when people think about migrants that are coming in and committing a crime, they'll think of people like Abdul Azidi and the most extreme.
The worst examples.
Exactly. So it would be interesting to see that. But I'd be surprised if, the government had the point of view where they knew that they had this information but they were withholding it because really it helps make their case. So maybe there isn't actually that much to disclose.
Maybe. I suspect it's because they are afraid of that thing of stoking racial tensions.
I think it's a bit too late for that, really, when it comes to this argument.
John, your view when it comes to... leaving the ECHR. So I think I'm right in saying, from memory now, that 36% thought yes, 32% said no, and there was quite a lot of don't knows.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people have no idea what it is. What is this convention of human rights? So, I mean, I'm not surprised. They're sort of trying to do their best when they're answering questions.
Yeah.
They also think it's kind of test to their knowledge. So it's all completely sort of...
Do you think it will be a winner for Sunak to do it, though?
No, I think everything will depend upon what people see in terms of results. Now, if in fact the argument is then quite a fine one, look, these people are standing in the way of our policy of restricting immigration, one way or the other. What do you think about those people who are doing that? People would have a very clear view on that. But to suddenly say, I know what we'll do, let's have a go at this stage in talking about the European Convention on Human Rights, that'll excite the public. No, of course it won't. They'll be interested when the plane is about to take off, people climb on board and say, you're not going because of this, we've got a writ out for you, you can't move. Now, that's what happened last year. Now, there are all sorts of changes that have happened behind the scenes.
Yeah.
That's much less likely this time if we get to that stage. If that happens, that's a flashpoint, and therefore they should be ready to then say, in which case we're going to act against, we're going to remove ourselves from this European treaty, and because we've got to go on with our policy. And that would have a lot of support.
And it's such a big deal as well. I think they just kind of throw it out there. Oh, let's leave the ECHR, and people don't really take the time to look at how much the ECHR actually affects this country. I mean, even the fact that we were the first signatories and there were British lawyers that actually drafted this from the beginning. It's a different world, though, wasn't it? It's a different world, but also there's a lot of things within that that actually relate to us in present day.
But there's also a lot of fear-mongering amongst some people on the left to say that you will lose all those rights. I find it highly unlikely that you would... But it's the same as Brexit. When we left the European Union, we simply just adopted all the laws. We didn't start scrapping them en masse, and we still haven't, actually, to this day. The reality is you will adopt most of those, but you'll get rid of the ones that stop the Rwanda bill. But I want to know, if you're going to put this as a potential solution, I want to know what's actually going to replace it. Of course. Rather than just saying, oh, let's just leave it. They haven't actually done that.
But also, people are more and more confused about international law. People say, right, that's why we shouldn't be sending arms to Israel. So we need international law. But hold on a moment. With Rwanda, we don't need international law. We want to just dismiss that and get on with what we're doing. You can't have those two views in government.
Let me just squeeze in another question here, because 55% of the public were saying that they don't trust either of the two major parties to stop the boats. So if you then also have a look at the Labour of 45% in the polls, I mean, essentially, reading between the lines, is people have given up on the idea. They want to stop the boats, but they've given up on the idea of it, and they're just going to vote Labour because they're sick of the Tories.
You've nailed it, Patrick. I don't think the public have any faith in any political party to solve this problem. It's pretty clear. I think poll after poll, I mean, even just to say that 7% would choose a Conservative government to tackle the boats over 15% for the Labour Party, just tells you where the debate's at, doesn't it?
But then also, even just being real, you cannot stop the boats because it's not just our problem, it's also a European problem. When you have this type of migration, it's always going to trickle in. But the solution really is, how do you actually combat that, and how do you actually overcome it? And I think that Labour's plan of actually having proper processing, having safe and legal routes for people, will at least cut that number down so that we're not dealing with it. We're not paying £8 million a day on hotels. So it's about an actual solution to reduce it significantly as well.
I'm not sure Labour will be able to do that, but at least they won't have a sign up saying stop the boats when the Prime Minister...
It's completely disingenuous.
It was another example of bad politics. Because, you know, I mean, it's all very well and good in, saying, but if you do stand in front of a slogan like that, which is a very binary slogan, and behind you is boat after boat after boat...
It's nuts.
Then, you are going to get served the receipts, unfortunately. But there we go. Look, all of you, thank you very much. Another great start to the hour. Coming up, as lazy train drivers, who are already having half the year off, reject a £65,000 a year pay offer, is it time that we got tough on these militant unions? We discuss when my press pack returns for all of tomorrow's front pages. But next, As schools defy ministers to let children change their gender behind their parents' backs, with some parents only finding out they transitioned at parents' evening, is transgenderism a social mania spreading through society? World-famous author of Let's Talk About Kevin, the brilliant Lionel Shriver, has based her latest novel around this very topic, and I'm very pleased to say that she is live next. Stay tuned.
Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
I believe our farmers can compete globally. If I visit some Somerset farmers, they are extremely efficient and highly competitive and innovative, and we need to encourage the best.
And it's a high-end
practices.
product.
It's a high-end product.
Which was one of the points that was being made earlier.
And that we have to focus on what we are good at. And what our protectionism does at the moment is protects Irish beef farmers, French beef farmers and Dutch beef farmers, as opposed to buying cheaper beef from Australia. I have no desire to protect EU farms.
The problem is that we live in the Northern Hemisphere and we have a very difficult climate. So actually, and we know this because when the Corn Laws were repealed in 1846, we know darned well what happened to agriculture.
It led to cheap bread. It made the society much better off.
This has been an argument going on for 150 years.
It's simply wrong. British agriculture didn't collapse at that point. There was a glut in the market 30 years later, which comes much after the Corn Laws.
Well, obviously, things were much slower in those days. It took a long time for that to impact.
Actually, do you know what? The principles of that debate and this debate are not dissimilar.
No, that's right.
They're not dissimilar.
It's very, very... I always go on about Corn Laws. It's my favourite subject.
No. And it was a wonderful upwelling and grassroots campaign and all the rest of it. But whether we have a Conservative or a Labour government, do you actually think that a Labour government will be any closer or more connected to your community than this Conservative one?
The Labour government, it's in their interest to make sure that Britain has got food. And with the way the world is right now, we're in a very fragile situation, which is why we need food security. And every farmer I know talks about food security because we understand how much less food is being
We better have a look at net zero commitments too, but another time.
It's net zero commitments it'll be wind farms.
Enough. We can argue all night about this.
Let's do it. I'm up for arguing all night.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. I've got a very first look at tomorrow's front pages coming shortly. But right now, a shocking new study has revealed that schools are defying government guidance. They are allowing kids to change their gender behind their parents' backs, with one parent even finding out about their daughter's gender change at a parents' evening. Remarkable. Rules banning schools from excluding parents in requests from children to socially transition came into force in December. But analysis of more than 600 schools in England has found 73% of them are ignoring this guidance. So it comes just weeks after a similar study found a mere 28% of schools in Wales were informing parents if a child expressed a desire to change gender. I'm joined now by the legendary author Lionel Shriver, whose new novel, Mania, digs into the way that the school manias like the spread of extreme gender ideology in our schools come to dominate the world. Look, thank you very, very much. I mean, this is astonishing that schools are completely ignoring guidance and parents are finding out that their children are, you know, socially transitioning as they turn up for parents' evening.
Well, I have to blame the Tories, which is very popular. You blame them for everything. This was cowardly on Rishi Sunak et al.'s part, because the problem here is that it should never have been issued as guidance. It should have been statute. Basically, this is an ideological cult that has seized hold of our entire society, but especially our educational establishment. And it has to be stopped, and it should be stopped by statute. And they're being given a choice, and they're choosing not to go along with it. Given what a big social mania this has become, I would identify ever since about 2012, they should have known that only a hard and fast rule was going to stop it.
Yeah, so two very, very important points there. Let's deal with the first one first. Why do you think this is a social mania then? What do you mean by that?
It came out of nowhere. It suddenly became the only thing you could think. And people started using all the same language. And I was quite struck. I think of myself, like, as so many people do, as an independent thinker. But once all those documentaries started hitting the TV and all this propaganda hit the media, I realized I better keep my mouth shut. And that's not like me, right? But for a good 4 years, I didn't stick my neck out in journalism over the transgenderism issue, even though I found the trend incredibly disturbing. And finally got, I guess, grew a pair in 2016. And I think that we have broken the barrier on being able to talk about it. But that's a sign of a social mania, because you can't differ with it. Climate change is, I'm afraid, showing every sign of being a social mania, because it has the same characteristic. You absolutely cannot disagree with the premise, or, you're socially ostracized. So we talk a lot about groupthink, and I'm afraid that on transgenderism, this is a big groupthink problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea that we could, because we are in a situation where an overwhelming majority of schools, and presumably teachers as well then, would think that it is a good idea to not inform a child's own parents if they want to socially transition at school. You're right, all the markings of a mania. We've seen how people have bought into manias before, though. We've seen how they've bought into a variety of different manias when it came to things like lockdowns, etc., etc. But you said that one of the ways to stop this is through the statute. But if people are that manic about it, then they'll just break the law, won't they? They'll see themselves as martyrs. So is there another way of stopping this now? And I hope the kids is now a red line, right? This is a thing where everyone can go, right, leave the kids alone. So how do we stop this?
Well, it sure hasn't been a red line hitherto.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, they have been the primary victims of this movement. And I do think that this is starting to subside. The so-called detransitioners are probably going to help bring it to an end. But I think that we should find it humbling that we think of ourselves as terribly modern, but we have been captured by an ideology that makes it possible to mutilate children, to cut off healthy body parts, to give them experimental drugs. I mean, we would never have thought ourselves capable of this, especially on a mass scale, only a few years ago. So we've got to keep looking in the mirror and making sure that we haven't been collectively deranged. And I'm afraid this is a collective derangement. I mean, we are not supposed to use the word mother. We have to call pregnant women birthing people. I mean, it's even demented our language. And it's not on the level of just a bunch of activists. It's the NHS. It's the American Medical Association. adopting all these so-called gender-neutral terms and not really any longer believing in the reality of biological sex. And they're using language like assigned sex at birth as if it's an eeny, meeny, miny, mo. And that is medical people. And that's how deep and distorted the thinking has become.
Yeah. The NHS, the education system, I spoke earlier on about the civil service. I mean, when you do actually see it all laid out like that and so eloquently put out there by yourself, that word mania, I think, actually, it really does hit home, and I think it goes a long way to explaining it. Look, can I just say a massive thank you? I do hope to talk to you again on this issue at some point very, very soon. It is a wonderful author, Lionel Shriver, there. Now, a Department for Education spokesman said this: we're absolutely clear about the importance of biological sex, particularly in the context of safeguarding and the role parents must play in decisions about their children. Our guidance is clear that in nearly every case, schools should not support the social transition of primary-age children, including not using pronouns that do not align with the child's sex. I just want to emphasise again, 73% of schools in that study were not telling the parents. A joint statement by a group of organisations including Mermaid, Stonewall and Amnesty International UK said the Department of Education's guidance seeks to deny the existence of transgender pupils, discouraging them from coming out and being their authentic selves, and could lead to young people being forcibly outed to parents and teachers. It will erase decades of progress in making schools places that value difference and reject discrimination. So that's their view. Right, OK, look, I will just ask you this. You know, how on earth would you feel if you turned up to Parents' Evening one day and Susie had become Stephen and no one had told you? I mean, OK, question marks as to how well you know your own child, I get that. But do you not think that teachers should really be telling you, especially if there's guidance coming up? More shocking scenes at a Palestine protest because Hitler placards, yes, Hitler placards, are spotted in the boot of a car near the Home Office. But did the police bother to arrest the perpetrator? I'll reveal all when my press pack returns to go through tomorrow's front pages. This is Patrick Christys tonight on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Storm Kathleen is on the way for this weekend. It will turn unseasonably windy, but it's also going to turn unseasonably warm as well. Here's Storm Kathleen developing to the southwest of the UK. That's approaching through the next few hours to bring some rain to more southwestern areas through the next few hours. That rain will turn quite heavy as it moves into parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Further south, though, as the night progresses, it will turn that much drier, but the winds will really start to pick up through the early hours of Saturday, particularly across the southwest here. However, it's a southerly wind. It's dragging up exceptionally mild air, so it's going to be around 12 or 13 degrees to start the day on Saturday for many of us. So it's going to be a very mild day. Across the east as well, it should stay largely dry through much of the day, but you will notice that breeze. But it's in the west where we'll see the strongest winds. There is a wind warning in force for Northern Ireland, many western areas of Scotland, Wales and England. Here, there's likely to be some travel disruption. So if you are travelling about, make sure you check before you travel on Saturday. But in the east, where it's a little bit more sheltered and warmer, we could see 22 degrees on Saturday. Now, Sunday's going to be another fairly mild day, but there's going to be more in the way of showers for central areas of England, Wales, the southwest as well. These could turn heavy. The winds will also remain very strong across the far north of Scotland on Sunday. Into Monday, northern areas will likely stay fairly unsettled, but it looks like it could turn a little bit drier across the south, with temperatures returning closer to average.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's time to bring you a first look at tomorrow's news tonight with the front pages. Let's start with the Daily Mirror. Ex-prisoner's message to Kate. You inspired me to turn around my life. This will not beat you, my hero. An ex-prisoner inspired by the Princess of Wales to stay away from crime has sent a message of support. Let's go to the Daily Mail. Now civil servants to strike over work from home. Statistics staff plan walkout after being told to come to the office 2 days a week. Civil servants will strike after being ordered to return, just for 2 days. I mean, just remarkable, isn't it? Let's go to the Daily Express. PM, buckle up. Britain is ready for economic takeoff. An upbeat Rishi Sunak has brushed off polling blues and declared the economy would really take off as workers and strivers are rewarded with tax cuts today. So apparently, the big cut in the national insurance rate is saving the average worker £900 a year. Let's go to the Times. Pressure on junior doctors to end the strikes. Hope of fresh talks after consultants agree terms. Good. So NHS consultants now have backed a pay deal in a vote that offers relief to the patients. This obviously then could leave the junior doctors out on a limb, for want of a better phrase, and then make them more exposed. They are, as it stands, still demanding a 35% pay rise. Let's go to the Sun. Sasha and Isla, it's over. Stars say they are getting a divorce. Sacha Baron Cohen and Isla Fisher yesterday announced that they have sadly split. Let's go to the Telegraph. Mail cuts pose risk to patient safety, says NHS chiefs. Fears that reduction of second-class postal service will mean crucial appointments are missed. Interesting story here. We might get round to this a little bit later on. Alison Pearson, who's a regular panellist on this show, has got the story. Tories accused of blocking True Blues. This is all about the candidates being put forward at the next election and whether or not those with quotes-unquote traditional Conservative values are actually being blocked. Right, OK, so look, those are all of your front pages. There is, of course, my press pack here this evening with former BBC and ITV chief political correspondent John Sargent, entrepreneur, social commentator Joanna Jarju, and political commentator Alex Armstrong. I do want to talk about something that's on the inside of some of the papers first, though, and it's rail unions have reared their ugly heads once again. So they're going to bring misery to ordinary Brits everywhere. 5 rail operators walked out this morning over disputes on pay as they rejected an 8% pay increase that would take their pay from £60,000 a year to £65,000 a year. Now, it's worth noting that apparently train drivers only drive on half of the days of the year, but a 5k increase and a 4-day working week just won't cut the mustard with this lot. However, it's not just passengers that the unions are failing. These strikes have now cost our hospitality industry a whopping £5 billion since the start of the strikes in 2022. John, should these militants be tackled?
Well, they should certainly. I mean, the government should hold their hand and don't get too involved in all this. I mean, they're right to step back because we can't agree with these things. If you make the rail industry too expensive for travellers, don't be surprised if people find it very difficult to travel by rail, don't travel by rail. The economy then goes down. We need growth. I mean, it goes back to that old argument about how are we going to get this country to grow again? Well, certainly not by having these strikes. And also, the key point that worries me is they're arguing about work practices. Well, now, just that phrase chills you, doesn't it? Because that means they don't want to be efficient.
John, I mean, look, you can't surely be in favour. £65,000 a year to drive a train sounds all right.
Yeah, it sounds all right, but also it's the same argument that people make when it comes to consultants. I don't care how much you make. If you're part of the workforce and you don't agree with what's happening, then you've got every right, of course, to withdraw your labour. But also, this story made me think about everything that's happening when it comes to the water companies as well. When we had this conversation, we're throwing all the blame at the people who are the actual workers, but we're not actually looking at these private organisations and how much money they make and whether it's actually fair to the rest of us. We're the majority and we should stick with the people.
We don't live in a communist country, though,
We
don't.
don't.
And it is OK for a company to make a shed ton of money and for workers to be paid
but also
a certain amount of money.
Yes.
I mean,
but also, as John said, it's about the working conditions as well. Obviously, people go straight to the money, but it's about everything. And I think that, the government should give them support. And when we're actually laying the blame, we should look at the people who aren't coming to the table and negotiating rather than acting as if they're the problem.
Alex, would you drive a train 4 days a week for 65 grand a year?
Sounds great. Sounds good to me. It's like a little remote office moving around the country, isn't it? Get great views and everything. Look,
the view on the way into Slough is magnificent, mate.
OK, maybe I'm being a little bit too over-generous there. But look, 60k a year is a brilliant salary for most Brits, let's be honest. A lot of people be biting the hand off to get those jobs. It's like the tube drivers as well.
Alex.
I do, but I have worked hard to do that. But if I ever decide to take a pay cut, I might even consider
they
it,
work hard as well.
Yeah,
They haven't had
half the year they do.
They haven't had a pay
do you know what I
rise.
do, Patrick? Look, we've got the technology. Let's just automate the railways. Let's get this pain over and done with. The same for the tubes. Like, at the end of the day, it's the technology's there now. It's going to be a dying trade.
Robot trains.
It's going to be dying.
No holidays, no maternity leave, none of that stuff. Not saying that people shouldn't have maternity leave.
Your trains can ride 24/7. It's just the future, and we need to stop this nonsense because it's costing the economy and everyone else time, their jobs. I mean, if someone's on a paid salary by the hour and they can't get into work, they're going to lose out a day's salary.
But why are the stories never about also the people that they're negotiating with as well? Why is it always that they're doing it? I agree, and I understand why people have a problem with them, but we need to be balanced about it because they're not the only people at the table.
But I just want to quickly go on about productivity. This is a perfect example of where if you don't use the technology, you won't get any productivity, and don't be surprised if the economy just goes on.
If we use the argument for everything, then that's just...
Can I just add on Joanna's point, because it's really important. I worked in transport policy back in my political days, and unfortunately for me, and, it's so exciting.
It's your fault.
Oh, it's my fault, yeah. But I will say, Joanna is right. The franchise system is broken. There is no competition in that system. It's actually anti-capitalist in that respect. So we should find a new way. to do it.
The thing is, though, is that there's an irony. I think I did a monologue at the top of the 9 o'clock hour about left-wing activism in the civil service. They are apparently about to strike over working from home. Of course, then for not using the trains to get into work, and now the train striking as well. But look, professional tradespeople are up in arms. Yes, they are. Over B&Q's recent advert after homeowners are depicted attempting DIY. All right, let's just take a look, see if you can figure out what's wrong with this.
But guess what? A sledgehammer is louder.
OK. I didn't think... Did anything obviously wrong with that, anyone?
No. Yeah, they were messing everything up.
OK, right, so you're not a million miles off, all right? So after receiving 4 complaints, the Advertising Standards Authority decided not to investigate the advert, thankfully, but a B&Q spokesman said, our hope with B&Q's You Can Do It campaign was to help inspire confidence to those embarking on DIY journeys. By the sound of it, things have been very successful. So, seriously, the complaints were about them causing unnecessary destruction and that people might hurt themselves by trying their own DIY.
That's not marketing. That's being stupid, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is just regulators gone nuts. The fact they've had to respond for 4 complaints is absolutely insanity.
So they investigated it. They decided not to do it. 4 people complained about it.
Why have they bothered wasting time investigating 4 complaints? What's going on?
I know.
Too much time working from home.
Yeah. Were you into DIY?
No.
By the way, I'm
so
not
it didn't
either.
work on me.
By the way, I'm not either. I'd have to call someone round to do absolutely anything. Yeah. Do you know how to?
I used to. No, I used to when I have to and put out wallpaper and things. But I'm Johnny pleased not to have to do it now.
Do you know what I did like about that advert? The diversity that was in.
Can we play it again? Is that possible? Come on, let's play it again. Let's play it again. I think if we've got it, that would be great. I mean, let's just have a look. Yes, the problem here, by the way, just remind ourselves, is that apparently this is going to encourage people to do DIY themselves, which, by the way, is the point of the advert, right? But the diversity is great. Let's have a look. Go on.
But guess what? A sledgehammer is louder.
of tools by the looks of it.
Diversity
Actually, it's
of
encouraging
equipment.
women. You've got the one with the sledgehammer. It didn't encourage me.
Can I just say, that was the specific bit of that advert that garnered the most complaints was woman with sledgehammer.
Do you know what? I knew it. I knew they were going to pick up on the woman. I knew it.
Then how do you...
No, John, not quite. It was that she was wrecking, so the concern would be that it would encourage other people to smash through their living room
It's
wall.
four blokes at home who've gone, I hope my wife doesn't start doing that.
Yeah.
Four
Don't give her any ideas.
Don't get any ideas. Right, OK, look, coming up. More serious matters now. Owen Jones has landed himself in a bit of hot water. Yes, we will discuss all of it.
Which has decided to make the Palestinian people pay for the grievous crimes it committed by attempting to exterminate the Jewish people.
Come on, have some decency.
So we're going to discuss that in a bit more detail when I crown the Greatest Britain's a Union jackass later. I'll also have some more of the front pages, and we will be discussing as well. GB News was at these rallies that were going on in London today, and someone turned up with Hitler posters in the boot of their car as part of a pro-Palestine protest. So I'll be showing you exactly what happened there. Stay tuned.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
One more story in. Milton Keynes, absolute chaos in the city. 300-odd youths arrested or at least involved in a
stampede.
A stampede.
Yeah,
what's been going on?
A stampede through the...
there we are.
This is the video. So this is a stampede through a shopping centre in Milton Keynes. I think, Amy, you live there, don't you? You live nearby.
For those on radio, we can see literally hundreds, scores of kids.
I think there are about 300 kids.
Are they in school uniform?
Yeah, quite
This is as they've broken up from school, presumably.
Security tried to intervene. They've been accused of being heavy-handed. But I think this speaks to the fact that the landscape of youth services has just been decimated, and there's literally nothing for kids.
So hang on, whoa. You think that this has happened because social services have been diluted?
Youth services.
This is because there's no police around, there's no oversight, there's no deterrent, and 300 kids think that they can run through a shopping centre, frightening shoppers out of their lives.
Going to a shopping
Amy,
centre.
sorry, my kids would not be behaving like that because there's no ping pong available at the local.
Aren't your kids like
youth
age
centre.
4 and 5? These are teenagers, and our teenagers are headed into a world where there are no leisure services.
It's got nothing to do with crime.
If
we up the ante on basketball, it's not going to stop kids being stabbed on the street.
What creates antisocial behaviour is having nothing to do.
It's lack of discipline in the home, lack of discipline in the home, and lack of policing on the streets, and a judiciary and a penal system that is utterly liberal.
You're going right to the end of the line. What about the preventative measures?
But what about the people that these people affect by running through a shopping centre and stampeding? When there's mothers with kids in prams frightened out of their lives, and we're worried about the social services aspect
I'm talking about
that's perhaps led to
You're
it.
talking about stick, right?
Yeah. So how long does your solution take to resolve it? Mine takes about 30 seconds. More police, bang them up. Yours...
Russell, should parents be fined?
More police, bang them up.
Absolutely. And the kids should be taken to task.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. Now, normally at this point in the show, we bring you even more of tomorrow's front pages, but none of them have landed yet. So I am joined by my press pal, former BBC chief political correspondent John Sargent, entrepreneur and social commentator Joanna Jarju, and political commentator Alex Armstrong. But no matter, because we have got our own story here at GB News. Well, it's been another day of chaos on London streets. So 500 police officers deployed to the streets during another day of pro-Palestine marches. But an activist carrying Hitler placards in the boot of his car was stopped by police before being released and allowed to rejoin the crowds 10 minutes later. The signs featured photos of Hitler morphing into Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with the caption, "The irony of becoming what you once hated." Now, the police claim that the posters weren't distributed or used in the marches. But luckily for us, GB News reporter Charlie Peters was at the scene, and he says that he saw with his own eyes dozens of these placards throughout the march. Alex, I'll start with you on this. From what we can gather, the placards that were in the boot of the car were removed, but the individual who had gone to the effort of making and then distributing those placards was allowed to just crack on.
Yeah, it's totally bizarre, isn't it? That this is, again, this sort of two-tier policing system we've spoke about so often, which is, you know, if this was a British person carrying something similar, you know, they'll probably be arrested pretty quickly. But again, it's this racial tension we're seeing that the Met Police can't seem to navigate that. And it's a hate crime to have printed these posters and then to bring them out in public. And obviously, as Charlie said, he's seen them. You know, clearly there's a crime committed there. Why are the Met Police now saying there wasn't a crime committed, we didn't see anything? It just seems like it's turned a blind eye. And I can't believe that this is the state of the streets of London. Peaceful protest and respectful protest is a cornerstone of our democracy. You can't have this.
Yeah, what do you mean? I mean, I just think, as pretty much as a rule, when you bring Hitler into it, you've lost, right? But like,
oh yeah, absolutely, iron rule. You know, the moment you start saying they're like Hitler. Oh, no, they're not exactly like Hitler, you know. Yeah. And so you've ruined the argument. Much better talk about real things that affect you and say, hold on a moment, a lot of people are dying and they shouldn't be dying, and they're, you know, these people are civilian, and all those arguments are much stronger arguments than talking about Hitler.
Well, I'll tell you what, that actually brings me on to this Owen Jones clip, and I'll come to you off the back of it, John, and get your views on this. So notorious left-wing journalist Owen Jones has landed himself in more hot water over his take on the conflict in the Middle East. Just see what you make of this.
Now, you're right, Britain doesn't supply that many arms, but if it ends arms sales, that then puts huge pressure on Germany, which has decided to make the Palestinian people pay for the grievous crimes it committed by attempting to exterminate the Jewish people.
Come on, have some decency.
And Germany has decided it can make up for its obscene guilt by forcing somebody else to pay for the crimes that Germany committed. It's a very straightforward point. There's nothing offensive about it.
I mean, is there something a bit offensive about that, John, do you think, or not?
I can imagine that people would be offended by something like that, but I do think that what he was trying to explain was that it does make sense that obviously Germany will realise that the optics wouldn't be great if, you know, even if the German government realised or had the point of view from the beginning of this conflict that Israel weren't in the right. It's just the optics are just wrong. So I think that's what he's trying to explain, that, you know, obviously moving forward, they want to be seen to have completely obviously learnt from the ridiculous atrocities of the past. So it works for them as a government to kind of be on the other side.
You're shaking your head.
Yeah, look, I think this is just absolutely disgraceful, what he said. Look, there's nobody alive in Germany today that committed any atrocities in 1945 or the 1940s. No single person. The German people have nothing to feel sorry for anymore. Of course, it's always very important that we reflect on history and don't repeat the same mistakes. But to draw any comparison to what happened in the Holocaust, to what's happening in Gaza, is absolutely insane. They are very, very, very different things happening in those two countries. This is a war. There was not a war fought against Jewish people. There was an extermination of them in gas chambers, in camps across Europe. This is a very different thing. Israel are not moving people in Gaza into camps and exterminating them. We cannot draw a comparison between an ethnic cleansing and a war.
OK. John, your views on what was said there, then?
Well, I mean, you think for my generation, the whole sort of feeling of such intensity. I went to a concentration camp as a young cadet, so that we were taught these things, as it were, and the feeling that you'll never get a crime as bad as this, and you must remember that, is the basis of a whole series of thoughts and feelings that have lasted right through the period of my life, throughout the whole of my life. And it's not something to be casual about. It's certainly not something to make remarks of, oh, yes, what about this? It's like that. No, it was a horrendous, absolutely extraordinary crime that was committed, and weren't we told about it? Quite right, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, to call Owen Jones left-wing, he's far left, let's be honest. I mean, he throws around the far-right comments to anyone that disagrees with him, but he's a very far-left journalist to say something like that.
Can you also see the point of view that if Germany did have the opposite point of view to what they have now, that the optics would not be great, and they would, obviously it would be smart of them to consider that when they're also thinking about Israel and Gaza?
Look, you could make that argument, but if I was the Chancellor of Germany, I'd go, we are not responsible for what happened in the 1940s. We are a different country now.
I suppose, yeah, but I think the point is that they might feel like, whether or not they
somebody would accuse them of it, but they shouldn't feel that way.
But they should also remember, and we say remember so that things like that don't happen again, so it will be at the forefront. It's basically something that their country is always going to be kind of plagued with.
All right. OK, well, it is time now to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. Now, John, I'm going to start with you with your greatest Britain, please.
Right, Superintendent Andy Brennan. You might not have heard the name, but he was the one who promised the family of the Bradford policewoman who was killed, murdered nearly 20 years ago. And he said to her, I will make sure, they said to the family, I will make sure that all her killers are behind bars. And so this week he was able to say for the first time, I did it.
Oh, good. OK. Oh, it was a good start. OK, go on, Johnny. Who's your greatest Britain, please?
Mine is an honorary one, and we've seen all the images from the awful earthquake in Taiwan, and it's the Taiwan maternity staff who rushed to keep babies safe through the earthquake. It was literally, I don't know if anybody's seen the video online, but everything was rattling and they were, you know, reaching, trying to get these small cots of the video. So, absolute superheroes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've got some images of it there, and yeah, remarkable that they've managed to do that. There we go, good stuff. OK, so yeah, so this is a maternity ward in Taiwan, right? That's right. Yeah, you can see the incubators beds anyway. Just little babies.
Yeah.
And the earthquake's going, the managed to save it. So well done. OK, Alex, your greatest Britain, please.
Mine is a gentleman called Peter Block. He was heckled in front of his own union that he stood up for, a National Education Union, and he stood up to say that the debate they were having, which was is Israel responsible for this war? And he said, well, no, they're not. It's Hamas that's responsible for this war. And he stood up and got heckled out of the room.
So he stood up and got heckled out of the room?
In front of an audience of about 500 people, I think it was. He was the only one arguing against it.
Oh, we did a thing yesterday on the NEU, actually, and their leader, anyway, Daniel Kabidi, who was elected on a 9% turnout, actually, is an incredibly radical chap, I think you could say. Right, OK, today's greatest Britain is Andy Brennan. There we go. So that was John's choice there, that fantastic police officer who's managed to finally make sure that everyone responsible for the other police officer's death is now behind, well, murder, is now behind bars. Right, OK, Union Jackass, John, go on.
Humza Yousaf, he's the first Minister of Scotland. He is the one who's been promoting their new hate law, which, by the way, does not cover special protection for women in public spaces. He said, don't worry, there won't be a rush of people making complaints. Next day, 3,000 cases.
Yeah, a lot of them against him.
Overtime for the police.
Johnny, who's your Union Jackass?
Mine is the entire Tory government. All the ministers. Apparently, they were planning to make millions of pounds from members' data, courtesy of an app called True Blue. So they would be collecting all of this data and allow brands to sell products to supporters and tracking their location and all sorts.
So we're going to have to be quick, Alex.
Yeah, mine is, of course, Owen Jones for being an utter clown for saying what he said about Germany, which is utterly disgraceful. I can't believe he calls himself a journalist, frankly.
Well, Owen Jones is probably going to clip this up and put it out himself, but there we go. Anyway, right, look, thank you. Wonderful panel. Headliners are on next. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Take care.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Storm Kathleen is on the way for this weekend. It will turn unseasonably windy, but it's also going to turn unseasonably warm as well. Here's Storm Kathleen developing to the southwest of the UK. That's approaching through the next few hours to bring some rain to more southwestern areas through the next few hours. That rain will turn quite heavy as it moves into parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Further south, though, as the night progresses, it will turn that much drier, but the winds will really start to pick up through the early hours of Saturday, particularly across the southwest here. However, it's a southerly wind. It's dragging up exceptionally mild air, so it's going to be around 12 or 13 degrees to start the day on Saturday for many of us. So it's going to be a very mild day. Across the east as well, it should stay largely dry through much of the day, but you will notice that breeze. But it's in the west where we'll see the strongest winds. There is a wind warning in force for Northern Ireland, many western areas of Scotland, Wales and England. Here, there's likely to be some travel disruption. So if you are travelling about, make sure you check before you travel on Saturday. But in the east, where it's a little bit more sheltered and warmer, we could see 22 degrees on Saturday. Now, Sunday's going to be another fairly mild day, but there's going to be more in the way of showers for central areas of England, Wales, the southwest as well. These could turn heavy. The winds will also remain very strong across the far north of Scotland on Sunday. Into Monday, northern areas will likely stay fairly unsettled, but it looks like it could turn a little bit drier across the south, with temperatures returning closer to average.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
It's the first time we've had an admission from someone who at least used to be very senior in the party, saying that this election is not about winning, really, for the Conservatives now. It's about mitigating the losses.
There is broad recognition that this election has already been lost and that it's about damage limitation. And it is really important because it's the difference between whether, if Labour win a slim majority, then the fight is on for the next election. I know it seems silly to look 5 years ahead, but it does make a difference, versus basically accepting that we have 10 years of Labour government ahead.
Having an acknowledgement that the Tories are going to lose and lose badly, disastrously maybe, having that acknowledgement coming from somebody so senior is very demoralising for everybody else in the party, but also doesn't it make it then look rather immoral for them to just drag on right through to maybe November?
Personally, I think Rishi Sunak should name the date now. I think he should name it for October or November.
In terms of reform, if they're only 4 points behind the Conservatives in the latest poll, do we need to stop the narrative, which we have been using legitimately, saying, well, they're doing all right in the polls, but they won't win any seats? Do we need to change that perspective now?
I think it's really difficult to say. It depends on Reform's electoral strategy. There's a lot of evidence that in certain parts of the country with certain demographics, they do have a really good chance. So I think if they target seats in the red wall and other places where there's big disillusionment with the Conservatives and what they'd promised, I can't imagine that Reform are at the stage where they could take masses of seats. It's more about that portion of the vote that they'll be taking away that I think is going to result in that massive Labour landslide.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's